Hello and welcome to your latest Her Game 2 podcast. I'm your host Clayton, and today we have another very special episode for you. We've done a lot of different bits of content since we relaunched the podcast series, and today it's another special one. It's South Asian Heritage Month. So to timestamp this, because you will be listening from the future, this is pre-recorded. It is Tuesday the 13th of August 2024, and that lands in South Asian Heritage Month. So we thought, what better way to celebrate and be advocates for it than do a podcast. So today I'm joined by Priyanka and Uma. Uma, I'll come to you first because I believe this is a first. You're the first member from the cricket side of Her Game 2 on the podcast. Welcome. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm doing good. And a little birdie tells me you've just come back from India, right? How was
Yes,
that?
literally yesterday. It was absolutely amazing. Always the best time going back to India. Yeah.
Oh, amazing. And because you are the first member of the cricket side of Her Game 2 on the podcast, could you tell me a little bit more about yourself? If you could introduce yourself, your background, and a bit about what you do within cricket for Her Game 2.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I'm Uma and I'm from Nottingham. I live between Leeds and Nottingham, but you know, over the summer holidays, I've been based in Nottingham because I'm a uni student. And I'm from Mumbai in India, which is kind of my heritage. And I've been part of Her Game 2, the cricket side, since I want to say around March, I think. So so this is my first kind of cricket season being part of Her Game 2. And part of what that's looked like for me personally has been promoting all of the kind of social media side of Her Game 2 cricket, promoting the post to my audience, making my followers aware of because a lot of my followers are South Asian, just like me. A lot of them are family friends, and a lot of them are friends that I have from the community. So kind of encouraging them to kind of get involved. And and in terms of what I've personally have done for Her Game 2 cricket, I wrote an article. I think it was published, I want to say a couple of weeks ago, maybe 2 weeks ago, and it was about my personal relationship with cricket, and how that's kind of developed throughout my entire life, and how it's kind of linked to my heritage, because I think I can't talk about cricket without talking about my heritage. And that was quite a fun article to write about. And because one of the messages of South Asian Heritage Month this year was kind of personal stories, and what can you tell, it's all about talking about your story. So I thought that's a perfect way to do it. So yeah, that's kind of what I've been doing with Her Game 2 cricket since I've begun.
Oh, that's beautiful. Thanks for sharing that. And as the podcast unravels itself today, we'll dive a little bit more into your heritage, as you mentioned there. Priyanka, welcome to the show. I believe it's a debut for you too, and you're from the football side of Her Game 2. So same as Uma, could you introduce yourself, tell us a bit about your background and your role within Her Game 2?
Sure. So thanks for having me. I'm Priyanka. I have been with Her Game 2 for over 2 years now, I think. I am the club ambassador for Aston Villa for the men's side of the game. And as for my background, I am of Indian heritage. My family are from Gujarat, which is a state in northwest India. I had to do never eat shredded wheat there. But my family, my parents were born in East Africa, in Kenya and Tanzania. So I feel a little bit conflicted sometimes with my background and my heritage. But yeah, roots are Indian for sure.
Oh, amazing. Thanks a lot for sharing that. And yeah, I guess to set the scene, Uma, you already touched on it within your blog. There is an organization that we should shout out today. So southasianheritage.org.uk. They've been celebrating and championing South Asian Heritage Month since 2020. And this year, the theme, like Uma touched on there, was free to be me. And what they mean with that theme is, if I can find it, classic. It's celebrating the beauty of simply being yourself. And they've done this every year. They've come up with a different theme to celebrate. And within that theme this year, they've come up with kind of sub themes that they want people to focus on, and things that they hope would resonate within the community and embody the spirit of free to be me. And these are identity, community, gender, faith, family, life choices, and positive impacts. And as we get to know Priyanka and Uma and hear their stories more today, I'm sure listeners, you'll hear some of these different themes coming out. Uma's already touched on her heritage and how she finds it hard to not talk about that when speaking about cricket. Priyanka's spoken a little bit about the conflicting parts of her heritage there. So keep these in mind and go and check out southasianheritage.org.uk. That's their website, and you can find all of their socials on there. To set some further context on South Asian Heritage Month and a bit around why it is celebrated when it is. So the month begins on the 18th of July. This was the date that the Indian Independence Act of 1947 gained royal assent from King George VI, and it ends 17th of August, which was the date that the Radcliffe Line was published in 1947. And this was where the border between India, West Pakistan, and what was East Pakistan, which is now Bangladesh, was set. So learn a bit of history every day. I'm sure there'll be people that didn't know that. I certainly didn't, and I'm from Goa, so I should have introduced myself. I'm actually from Goa, South Asia. What countries make up South Asia is the final thing I'll talk about before we go into a bit more of the interview format. So it's Afghanistan, Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, the Maldives, Nepal, Pakistan, and Sri Lanka. So it's good to obviously be aware of all of those different countries. But let's go into it. Uma, I'll come to you first. Your journey into cricket, where would you even start with that? How did you get into cricket? Who were some of your role models? And you spoke about your heritage and culture there. Give us some insight into that.
I guess growing up, I'm talking about when I was like really, really young. It wasn't like I was so much into football. It was just that I was always exposed to it because my brother and my dad mainly, like in my family, and then all of my family friends, everything was just cricket. So every time any type of match was on, the TV is on, it's playing, like I'm there. Do you know what I mean? It's not like I'm necessarily watching it. And then what happened is when I turned, I want to say around 8, maybe 8, 10. This is when I started going to Trent Bridge, because I'm from Nottingham, is the local cricket ground, and that's when I really started getting into cricket because I see it. I think when you're young, cricket, well, especially Test cricket, it's like attention span, it's a little bit of a hard thing to get into, but when you're sat there like you're with the audience and like there's that you're watching the match, like especially I started to really enjoy it. I especially got into T20 format of cricket, and I think again maybe that was to do with my attention span. I've really gotten into Test cricket in the past kind of five years, I'd say. I'm 21 now, and then yeah, so I played cricket a little bit. It was more so, well, again, I touched a little bit on, in my article, I did touch a little bit on females, female players and cricket, which hasn't always been the best. My exposure with actually playing cricket as a child was like my brother going to play cricket. So I went and watched him. Like I didn't play it myself. And then when I got into kind of secondary school, my school did actually have a team. There were quite a few of us in my year that kind of, but it was indoor, like plastic bats, plastic balls. Like it wasn't, it was just kind of for fun. But yeah, nothing proper. And then when I got into sixth form, it was kind of quite traditional. It was like the boys play cricket and football and the girls play netball and hockey. I've never been into netball and hockey. I am into cricket. So I thought, why not play it? So me and my friend actually signed up to play football and cricket for the entire year because that was what we were interested in. So then during sixth form, I mean, COVID affected my sixth form, but when we did have physical, we were physically going into school. That's what I did. I played cricket and I kind of got into it because it was fun to play it. Not that I'm good or anything. Like I wouldn't say I'm very good, but it was fun. And then what happened is then I started uni, and I'm not part of any society or anything, but I'd still watch the matches. And then the year just been, I did a year abroad in Madrid because I do Spanish as part of my degree, and cricket is just not a thing in Spain. Like it's not a thing that people see. It's not anywhere. And I actually found that really strange. I was like, I'm not used to not constantly being surrounded by cricket. And then when it got to the IPL, which happened like a few months ago, I was like, I just want to watch it. Like, this is strange. Normally I took for granted that it was just always on my TV. So then I found these like, like streams online, whatever. And I'd actually keep up to date with all the matches. And then, then I came back from the year abroad, and then the Cricket World Cup was going on. And then now that, because it's the season, there's just so much cricket constantly going on. So I think as I've kind of grown up, I've just gotten more and more into cricket, and this will continue into the future. So yeah.
Oh, that is a beautiful story. And yeah, you've done some very cool things. The only thing I would say is I agree on the attention span. I definitely dipped out of Test cricket, but now that I'm getting older, I think I'm turning into one of those traditionalists where I'm like, Test cricket is the proper form of cricket, and I'm one of them. Yeah. But obviously, it was a great year for India this summer, winning the World Cup. Yes. How was that for you?
Oh, crazy. It was just amazing, like keeping up to date with all the matches. And then I think it was always interesting. I think there were quite a few problems with the pitches at some point. So a lot of the matches were a bit like, oh, like what will happen, blah, blah, blah. And it's hard, actually. I'm sure both of you will relate. But when you're from two countries that have, like, when it comes to football, I am into football, not majorly, but it's quite easy for me to just say I support England because India and football is just like whatever. Like, but when it comes to cricket, I'm an India fan. But it's also like a bit of a contrast, where it's like, oh, like I support England, but like when it comes to everything, but when it comes to, when it comes to cricket, I'm definitely India. So it's interesting when I speak to my English friends that watch cricket and we're like against each other. It's like, oh, like it's really fun. So it was quite nice. It was really fun to keep up with the World Cup this year. Yeah.
Oh, nice one. And yeah, Priyanka, we'll come on to a bit around your background in a minute. But just on that note, I know you touched on having some areas of conflict within yourself with some of your background. Does any of that kind of...
Oh, 100%. All of it resonates.
Yeah, okay. What bit resonated the most?
All of it, I think. Well, firstly, I also did my year abroad in Madrid.
I feel left out now.
I have had the same kind of like conflict internally about whether to support India or England for cricket. And my entire life, I've supported India because I think when it comes to cricket, it's more of a cultural experience. And I think particularly in the Indian community, it's like, it's a staple. Like you've got to like cricket. And if you like cricket, you've got to support India. Kind of culty in a little way, but not in a bad way. And I have actually been checking myself for a few years thinking like, I support England for football. Should I not be supporting England for cricket? It doesn't really marry up. But I think what kind of makes cricket what it is for me personally is the whole like community, family, cultural feel to it. And it makes it so much more enjoyable. So I don't think I could ever see myself supporting England from a cricket standpoint. But yeah, it's definitely something that I have checked myself on a few times.
Yeah, I feel very seen and understood here. Again, just to kind of copy you both, my journey has basically been the same. Growing up, I'd say I was very much Team England. So I was born and raised in North London, despite my kind of ethnic background. But as I'm getting older and I think I'm becoming more aware about my beliefs, my values and everything like that, I'm getting more and more in touch with my actual heritage. And yeah, I think so. The Olympics has just been on. Team GB were playing India in the hockey, and I was supporting India, and that was a first for me, which I haven't really done throughout the years. But going back to yourself, Priyanka, Uma touched on kind of how she got into cricket and her community. How did you get into football, and how was that experience for you growing up? I know at Her Game too, we speak a lot about kind of sexism in football, right? Which is why the campaign started. So how was that for you, but being of a South Asian background growing up?
I probably had a bit of a unique experience with myself and football and growing up because I'm born and bred in Northwest London and I support a Birmingham-based football team. So it's a pretty rogue one. My dad started supporting Villa from when he was in Tanzania in the 70s. He used to write to football clubs because he just loved English football, and Villa used to write back. And I think they went and played there in Dar es Salaam when they were relegated to the third division or something, and he went to go and watch them. So he started supporting Villa from then. And when my brother and I were born, it was like, you support Villa or you're out of my house. So I wasn't really left with much of a choice. And so being from Northwest London, where geographically my local team would Premier League team would probably be Arsenal. And
should have supported them.
And also being Indian, where everyone supports United, Liverpool, or Arsenal, but primarily United or Liverpool, because they were all glory hunters in the 80s. It was pretty tough being able to explain being a Villa fan. Then you add on the layer of being a girl growing up in Northwest London who's Indian, who is a Villa fan. It didn't really make a whole lot of sense. I actually kind of found that it empowered me a little bit. I thought it's become a bit of a personality trait of mine, but I think it actually made me a stronger person, because it enabled me to, or it challenged me when people question me why I support Villa, why people question why a girl likes football, why people question, well, you're Indian, like, oh, are you not more interested in, like, if you're interested in sports, you're not more interested in cricket, or like, oh no, but you should be dancing, or those kind of things, the stereotypical stuff. And so overcoming those challenges and overcoming those stereotypes was difficult, but I definitely do think it's made me a stronger person today. And I wouldn't have it any other way, to be honest.
Yeah, no, that's great to hear. And I guess this is very much a generalization, so feel free to disagree and share your views on this. But I feel historically South Asians are underrepresented in football compared to cricket. Would you agree with that? And if so, what do you think are the key reasons behind that? And do you think there's anything that can be done to change that in the next few years?
Yeah, I completely agree. I think even when I was growing up, there was always more of a likelihood of me playing cricket on the weekend. Don't get me wrong, I wasn't actually, because my local cricket club, or the cricket club that my brother went to, because he got precedence in playing sports because he's a boy, they played on Sunday mornings, but I had to go to Gujarati school on Sunday mornings every week for 8 years to do my GCSE. So I wasn't allowed to play cricket, which infuriated me at the time. And I played a bit of football in school, but I mean, I was never great. But again, it was like the narrative was pushed of like, oh, you play, to Uma's point, you play netball, you play hockey, you play tennis or whatever, the more feminine, like the sports that are seen as more feminine, which was always frustrating for me. But I think in terms of your question with representation, I think it goes back to the cultural point. Like, obviously cricket is such a cultural sport for Indians. It's like embedded in Indians. It's a way of life. It's a part of life. Like, people idolize growing up. Like, I think about all the cricketers I used to watch. I can still probably list them all off the bat. But football, I think, I'm trying to think of the best way of phrasing this. I think cricket was maintained from a cultural perspective by the community because it was seen as a cultural thing, whereas I think football has a very different persona to it. And it wasn't like, oh, we're maintaining our own culture by being in this country, like it was for cricket. I don't know if that makes any sense. I'm not really
phrasing it very
well. But I also think it's a bit of a systemic problem. And I've been having a few conversations with people recently who are doing a lot of work behind the scenes with trying to improve the perception of football and trying to improve the representation of football, or of South Asians in football. And it's all well and good, like, having the odd player here or there. It's all well and good, us doing things on behalf of South Asian Heritage Month and talking about how, this is what South Asian Heritage Month is within, and like, expressing that to the footballing world. But in actual fact, I think the problem kind of lies in the bottom up, and like from a grassroots level, the opportunities that are probably available within also communities that are probably more densely populated with South Asians, that's not there. I don't think those facilities are quite set up for it. Whereas, like where I'm from in Northwest London, you'll find cricket clubs left, right and centre where you'll find all South Asians going there. But growing up for me, and particularly like the people that I knew, I don't think there was that clear pathway into football. And I think it's probably an education piece that was needing to be had for like an older generation to kind of see that opportunity is there, which wasn't about at the time. But I think going forward, I think work needs to be done from a more systemic standpoint to be able to build that up and grow it from the bottom level, and equally have representation to then show people that actually you can make it. It's not a dead end road to go into football and feel like you're not going to be able to succeed.
No, that is a brilliant answer. No, not at all. There's things that I hadn't considered there at all, to be honest. So it's been very thought-provoking. And I guess one thing that immediately comes to mind when you talk about representation is I always assume, again, and it's dangerous to make assumptions, but I'm a brown guy and I watch football every week, and I never really see brown people playing football. So I guess, Uma, coming to you on that, is that something that ever came across your mind when you were kind of debating between football, cricket, in terms of seeing people of your same skin color in those sports?
Probably. I don't think yeah, watching cricket, you definitely see a lot more brown people. Yeah, I think, and especially, well, a lot of the matches I grew up watching were actually like India matches. So obviously everyone's Indian. So there's definitely that. And yeah, growing up, I don't know. That's really interesting. I've never thought about it because I haven't been a football fan. But I've never really been, I've never like really been into footballers either. Like, I don't know, maybe it's because I haven't seen myself represented. I've not thought about it like that. Whereas with, cricket, that's something interesting that I will think about, I think. I don't have an answer right now, but
it was
that's
more of an
interesting.
open question. Yeah, it was just an observation I had. And I know my little sister's going to be watching this, so I'm definitely going to ask her if that's something that's been a part of her thought processes growing up. But staying with you, Uma, who would you say within the world of cricket then? Because I think you decided very early on cricket was your kind of niche, right? Who would you say were your role models growing up?
Interesting question. I think definitely of the a lot of the Indian national team players, definitely, you're seeing Kohli, like every time, like even the classics like Dhoni, every time a lot of them have had biopic films now, and every time I've watched the films and I've gone with my family and it's been amazing, and I always feel so inspired. I don't know, inspired to do what, because I don't play cricket myself, but I've always, those films give me the inspiration to be like, oh, in terms of local cricket, it's interesting. Like my brother's favorite, like me and my brother's favorite player, he plays for Derby now, but it was definitely Samit Patel, who it's I am actually half Gujarati, Priyanka. So yeah, I'm half Gujarati, but both of my dad's Maharashtrian, but they grew up in Mumbai. So definitely having that representation as well. I think that's definitely, like, he's so cool. Like he's Indian, and like he plays in my he plays for my local county team. Like that's amazing. So I definitely do think that's why I wanted to reflect on the what you were saying about representation, because when it does come to kind of county cricket, if I think about my favorite player, like, he is Indian. So it's like, that must mean something. It must be in my mind, just not always like thought about on the forefront. So yeah.
Yeah, 100%. And Priyanka, I know you spoke about your journey being very unique and kind of finding it empowering in a way, the way that you kind of found yourself in there. Did you have any role models of South Asian heritage at an early age?
To be honest, no. Not as in footballers, no. There weren't any, I don't think, at that time. Yeah. I think the pathway was just created for me as a consequence of growing up in my household, in all honesty. My dad and my brother were they loved their sports, and so it didn't really give me much of a choice but to fall into that as well. But I wouldn't say there was any standout person within the footballing world that I saw and I was like, oh, that makes me want to like football, or that makes me want to strive to have a career in football, or anything like that. And I think that's the sad part of it, like, because there is such a lack of representation. I never felt as though it was a career path, not to play, but, in sports otherwise, for me to pursue, because there weren't people around for me to think that, oh, actually it is achievable. And, if that person's done it, then why can't I? It probably took me a long time to be able to fall into like a place where I am now actually working on the sports side of things as my day job. But that's only as of February this year, aside from, the Her Game 2 stuff and everything else that I do outside of my day-to-day job. But I do think, had there been some sort of representation, or had there been some sort of role model or encouragement even, and I actually don't mean this in a disrespectful way at all towards my family, but I think you spend a lot of time trying to challenge cultural norms and social stigmas. You know, to an extent, those traditional gender roles still exist, and you know, the societal pressures to kind of conform to those traditional roles, I think in turn potentially actually like discouraged me from pursuing something that was more along the lines of like what I wanted to do. You know, I used to go to Bollywood dance class, or I used to do ballet when I was a kid, and anyone who knows me, that probably blows their mind that I ever did that. But I think it is a consequence of society and culture that we've grown up in. And so the onus has been on us as a generation to be able to push past that. And I think now you can see it filtering through slowly. You're seeing more and more representation. You're seeing more South Asian players, South Asian referees, people in senior positions of South Asian heritage. And so, yeah, I think we're on the road to be able to inspire future generations. But I think for my generation, like I'm 31, so it was just never about like 20 years ago, 15 years ago, whatever it was. So yeah, long story short, no, I wouldn't say I had a role model.
No, it's interesting because I'm a similar age to you, so I'm 29, and in the football world, yeah, there was no kind of South Asian role models for me. And I remember, like, when you're a kid, you get bantered quite a lot. And looking back at it, it probably was racism that I thought was banter towards me. But it was, there was no real role models in the world of football for me to look up to. And on the cricket side, Uma's listed off all of the legends already. So there's
Rahul Dravid, VVS Lakshman, Yuvraj Singh. We're a bit
exactly, yeah. But there's so many on the cricket side of things. So it'll be interesting to see. Like you say, I think the groundwork at grassroots level is being improved upon compared to when we were growing up as children. So it'll be interesting to see for the next generation the knock-on impact of that. But tying it into her game too, Uma, coming back to you, I know you spoke about you maintaining a lot of work on the social side of things and promoting a lot of the stuff within cricket. What more do you think the campaign like Her Game 2 and other charities can do to raise awareness around South Asian, I'm going to say women, because I think in the cricket world, I don't think South Asians are a minority, right? But specifically women, and I know you spoke about your experience and trying to find yourself when you're in Madrid and a group of people. What more do you think companies can be doing to raise awareness there?
That's a very interesting question. I definitely think so. Her Game 2 at the moment, they've had a couple of dedicated fixtures. So they've gone to in the kind of cricket. I think there was one in, if I'm wrong, I'm sorry, I think it was Gloucestershire. And then, so that's quite nice because they had activities. It was mainly, for all age groups. So for the younger kids, those are kind of, I think it's something that definitely needs to be focused on all generations, but especially kids, because I think those kids will kind of grow up with that love. Whereas maybe as an adult, it might be a bit harder. Like, as you know, in both mine and Priyanka and your experiences, it's something that you grow up with that kind of sticks with you. So like all kind of activities, like the activities that they did there were like I know they did a couple of coloring in exercises, just getting involved. And I think that was really nice to see. And it was, I think it just happened in the past week or so. I want to say week or so.
Nice.
But yeah, and that stuff like that from Her Game 2 cricket side is really positive, and it's really, for the future as Her Game 2 cricket develops, it's really exciting to see all of this going on. In terms of in the wider picture of other kind of, I think, as you said, it really has to start at the grassroots kind of level. Like, just, I don't know, like specifically how, but just kind of for women, because obviously for men and everything, they have their kind of representation. But for women, and especially South Asian women, it's kind of just promoting, kind of like, there are people like you that do this. Like you're the type of person that you are is represented in sport. This goes for both cricket and football. But I think there's a lot that needs to be done in kind of making that bigger. Like, I don't really have an answer for how.
No, of course.
And specifically, but I think Her Game 2 cricket, with their dedicated fixtures and everything that they're trying to promote online and everything, it's definitely a step in the right direction to kind of promote that love for cricket amongst the younger generation and younger girls who will follow that love into the future. Because I think growing up, I definitely would have gone Trent Bridge if there was a dedicated fixture and then it was backed by Her Game Too. I would have loved if I'd seen Her Game Too at a young age. I'd be like, oh wow, like this is me, you know. So I think definitely I'm hoping that it's inspiring young girls to kind of realize that there is a space for them in that sport as well, rather than just boys. So yeah.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's beautiful. And like, again, tying it to my sister, and it's a little bit different, but I'm imagining, so set the context on what I'm about to say. I basically scared my sister off from football when she was a young kid because I took her to an Arsenal game and I'm a very vocal fan. So I basically just scared her off from the men's scene. And then she's recently got into women's football, and obviously Arsenal are pioneers in that sport. And we kind of went there 2 years ago and she loved it, the kind of atmosphere, the environment. It was so different to the men's football experience she had. So tying that to Her Game Too, I can understand what you're saying there. If it's a dedicated fixture, it's a more friendlier atmosphere. I think you'll attract a lot of different people there and you can kind of feel safe within that community. And I think that's a really nice way to continue to raise awareness. Bringing it back to Priyanka, and basically the same question for you. So I know you said at the start you do a lot of work with Aston Villa, the men's team, right? Is there anything that you think clubs like that are partnered with Her Game Too can be doing more of, specifically, I guess, twofold, both for general kind of raising awareness to eradicate sexism in football, but also to raise awareness and promote around ethnic minorities that are underrepresented?
Yeah, I actually think we've got a good thing going at Villa. I don't want to jinx it. We have, so for context, we've got Villa obviously as a club. We've got our Her Game Too Villa ambassadors, but we've also got Villa Bellas, which is the official supporters network for women, girls, and non-binary people. And so the three Her Game Too ambassadors for Villa are also part of the Villa Bellas like main team. There's like 5 of us in total. So we've got a really like good synonymous relationship there, which kind of enables us to be able to, it's a good way of leveraging like Her Game Too and Villa Bellas to be able to actually drive through things that we want to do with the club. And I think we've got like a relatively new, maybe now like a season in, new setup to the DEI team at Villa, with whom Sarah Breslin, who's a Her Game Too ambassador for the women's side, and she's the one that set up Villa Bellas. She's got a very good relationship with the team there. And what we've come to see in the last year or so is there's a number of diversity groups at Villa, ranging from networks that support fans with disabilities, let me start again. We've got Villa and Proud, which is a LGBTQ plus supporters network, and then we've got things like Punjabi Villains Together. So there's like a number of different supporters networks, but also diversity groups. And actually last season we had a bit of a launch spearheaded by the club, where they got all the flags for each of these diversity groups, and they're now up in the stadium on the side stand. Yeah, to kind of promote that like intersectionality, to promote the togetherness, to promote diversity, to show that like we're all different, but we're also all the same. You know, we're all there for a purpose. We go to Villa Park for one reason, and we have our differences, we have our uniqueness, we have our individuality, and that's okay, and we should celebrate that. And I'm hoping that like we get to do more, and there is conversations about doing things even bigger and better this year, this upcoming season. But we've spoken a lot about these diversity groups coming together, and like at the end of the day, we want the same thing. We want, although we might have our like unique goals for what we for who we represent, we also want the same thing at the end of the day in terms of wanting what's best for the club and being able to provide a platform for the people that we represent. And so hopefully going forwards, we're going to come together more and come together better as diversity groups. And I think the fact that the club have already kind of given us the foundation and set us up a little bit as of last season, that will then hopefully encourage that and steer it along a little bit. And I've had a couple of conversations as the only South Asian person of South Asian heritage within Villa Bellas with the other diversity groups that are of South Asian heritage, because I think there's a nice little tie there, and they're quite keen to be able to tap into supporters, like female supporters and non-binary supporters, with that link of like being of South Asian heritage. So we're going to see what we can do there as well to kind of bolster that. But yeah, I think it's an exciting time for sure, from a club perspective. And I think things like we had the no room for race, when we had the no room for racism fixtures and stuff like that, which happens every year. For example, last season, myself and someone from Punjabi Villains were invited to be able to speak on behalf of our supporters network and speak on behalf of our heritage in the fan zone, like on stage, before the game. So these little things I think will all add up, and they all obviously have some sort of impact, because even if one person hears what you say and they take on board what you say and it resonates with them, or it helps them to think in a different way, then you're doing something good. Of course we want to expand that and amplify that as much as we can, which will take time, but yeah, I think we're on the right path.
That is incredible. And I think, yeah, what you say there about just one person, obviously you want it to kind of free for all and completely snowball. But like you say, if it starts with one person, then I think that's how you kind of get that snowball effect. So well done and good luck. I know you said you don't want to jinx it. I don't think you will. That sounds like you're on a really good trajectory there. So nicely done. Just conscious of time, so look to get this wrapped up soon. But before we get out of here, stay with you for now, Priyanka. Is there anything else you'd like to share with our listeners about South Asian Heritage Month or your work with Her Game Too? I think you're on mute.
I am on mute, and I kind of lost my mouse. So I couldn't quite figure out what's going on there. I think it's great, just as from a generalized perspective, that we have South Asian Heritage Month, because I think we have such a rich culture, drawing attention to South Asian heritage by like having this dedicated month kind of, I guess, creates more visibility and representation. And, a common theme of what we've spoken about is the lack of representation. So I think as much engagement as we can get, in times like this will help us to challenge like conventional stereotypes, and, it will encourage like community engagement, but it will also allow us to appreciate the rich culture that we're privileged to be a part of and be able to share that with the world, because there's a lot to South Asian culture, and it really is a beautiful thing. And I think by screaming and shouting about it as much as we can, like I said, will enable us to kind of push forward more representation, encourage people like to be able to take that step, to the point that I was making about, even if you make an impact on one person, that's great. If one person listens to this podcast and feels like, okay, no, I actually want to be someone who is able to be a role model of some sort, or is able to embark on a path that's going to lead me to, achieve the career path that I want to achieve, and I'm of South Asian heritage, but I'm not going to see that as a barrier, then that's great. I think at the bare minimum, that's what we can ask for, is we don't want people to feel like they're faced with challenges or faced with barriers just because of where they're from. I think a lot of work needs to be done. A lot of work needs to be done to be able to kind of set the groundwork and set the foundation, like I said, from a grassroots level, to be able to build that up from a football perspective anyway. And that's going to take a long time. But in the interim, like, I think as much as we can try to encourage people and try to like push that community feel amongst ourselves, hopefully will make people feel a little bit more empowered to be able to strive for what they want and not see their background as a barrier of any sort.
That is beautifully said. And honestly, because I think there will be one person listening to this that's perhaps a bit younger, and you never know when people pick up on these episodes. It could be in a few years' time, but I think yourself and Uma, are going to be role models for these people. And like you said, especially in the world of football, they weren't role models that existed for people growing up in the kind of 90s and 2000s. And so I think that's beautifully said. And Uma, just same question to you before we get out of here. Is there anything else you'd like to share with our listeners? And a gentle nudge, I'd like you to promote your blog if possible.
Well, in terms of everything, I think Priyanka summed up amazingly. I was just listening and I was like, I really agree. But what I'd like to see on the cricket side of things is the promotion of women, because I feel like this is just from my experience talking with my family friends. We're South Asian women are so interested in cricket. They they love it. Like, and there is a lot of South Asian representation in cricket, but not necessarily like in the world, but not necessarily women. So, you know, I definitely like to see more of that in the future. Yeah, in terms of the blog that I did, it's on the Her Game 2 website. And yeah, so it's on there. And that was just, yeah, so one of the things about Her Game 2 that I'd really like to just say and promote and everything, I love Her Game 2, but one thing was, when it came to South Asian History Month, within our network and everything, so Paige is kind of the lead for the cricket side, and she wrote a message, and she was saying, you know, there's this month coming up, does anyone have any ideas of what to do? And I thought, like, you know, everything just sounds so me, because I'm a cricket fan and I'm South Asian. Like, this sounds like something that I would like to help with. So I sent her a message and I said, I don't know, I have a few ideas, maybe I could, you know, write something or like whatever. And one thing I really like about Her Game 2 is that they're so supportive. She was like, of course, like, you know, whatever you want to do, like, do it. And then we had a meeting about the article, and she was so like up for it. And she was so like, yeah, like, this is amazing, like, do it, write it. And she was so supportive with me kind of writing that. So yeah, so I'd say that having people that support you is also really important. And hopefully Her Game 2 and Her Game 2 Cricket are now are groups that can do that for everyone that kind of follows the organization and everything. So yeah.
Oh, brilliant. Honestly, Priyanka, Uma, thank you very much for sharing your stories. It's very brave to come on and kind of talk with such transparency. So credit to you both. Thank you very much for joining. Priyanka, you did actually steal my pitch. So when I talk about plugging the pod, I always talk about share it with one person. So in Priyanka's words, if this, no, jokes aside, genuinely, that is what it's all about. But one of the reasons we looked to relaunch this podcast series was exactly that. Her Game 2 is doing amazing work across different sports. And if by setting up a podcast, we can share your stories like you two have done today, we can connect it to meaningful themes like South Asian Heritage Month and others that will be coming up throughout the year. If one person listens to that, like Priyanka said earlier, that's all we can really hope for at this point. So if you've enjoyed this episode, please share your love with Priyanka and Uma. Drop the stream a like if you're watching on YouTube. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss future episodes. And if you're listening on audio, give it a 5-star review. And again, just share it with one person. That's all we need to do to continue to raise awareness. So Priyanka, Uma, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure, and we will catch you on the next episode.